Sandro Perri is a wonderful musician, producer, songwriter, and singer based in Toronto. From his work under the moniker Polmo Polpo and the adventurous aspects of his group Offworld, who were previously featured on this show, Perri continues to work in music like some kind of explorer, crossing genres to conjure his own unique sound. His latest album under his own name for Constellation Records is called In Another Life and features some astounding musicianship and vocal and lyrical contributions from Dan Behar of Destroyer and Andre Ethier. Ahead of the release of In Another Life, Sandro and I discussed his new studio space, the city of Paris, his aforementioned collaborators, his interest in whimsical lyrics, meditative music, and hip-hop, and much, much more. With in-kind support from Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, and Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, and of course listeners like you who make flexible monthly pledges at patreon.com/creativecontrol and subscribe to this podcast. This is the 426th episode of Creative Control, featuring Sandro Perri with your host, me, Vish Khanna.
Level field, but what goal is the game? Any answer, the question remains. To flourish and without expansion or gain. In another life.
Hi, Sandro. How are you?
Hi, Vish. I'm doing okay. How you doing today?
Not bad. Not bad. It's nice to speak with you again.
It's always really nice to hear your voice.
Where as you know, I think you've heard the show. I ask people where they are. I believe you are in Toronto today, correct?
That's true. Yes, I'm at the studio today.
Now, what studio is this exactly?
So I moved into a new studio in March, adjacent to Sonology, which is Jeff McMurrick's place.
Mm-hmm.
When I say adjacent, I mean actually across the hall. So in the same building, but across the hall.
Jeff has been, for those listening and who may know, that Jeff has been on this show. He is one of the co-owners of the E-Day Fix label, and he's a noted producer, engineer kind of guy, right?
Yeah, I didn't know he was on the show. I have to listen to that episode now.
Yeah, I did a little documentary about E-Day Fix when they turned 5 years old.
Oh, okay, cool.
So he's on it with a bunch of people, actually. Of course, Alex Durlak and Simone Schmidt and a bunch of people. Yeah.
The whole crew.
Yeah.
So, well, this space is shared between myself and Mike O'Neill, who you know.
Yes, Mike O'Neill, who's been on the show as well, and a member of Tons, and I just saw Tons play a couple of shows over the as we're speaking, I guess, over the weekend. Yeah.
So it's a cute little space that we have that we share, and it's quite quiet right now, actually, which is good, which is nice.
So do you have a schedule you share? I don't know how often Mike's in there. You're in there quite a bit these days, I assume.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we have a shared thing. A percentage thing.
A percentage thing. Is he in there a lot these days?
He's in here a little less than I am these days. He's doing some other things, and he doesn't maintain a constant, like a regular practice, I guess, of studio work in the same way. But he's in here. Yeah, he's in here. He's working on his new album.
Oh, great. That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and so beyond your own work, you produce other people. Would you bring them there?
I would bring them here, if they wanted to come here, or we might do things in other studios. But typically, I've only been in here since March, so I've actually only worked with two or three. Is it two or three? I think it's two other artists in here, like recording and producing and stuff. And so far, so good.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
And you've been hard at work at various things. You were just, I feel like you and I just spoke about Offworld within the year, it feels like. I think it wasn't that long ago, was it?
I think so. I think it was. I remember a spring kind of weather.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, it was probably April or May of last year.
Yes, and you hinted at the fact that you might have a solo record coming out soon, and here we are. It's called In Another Life, and it's among your most fascinating and satisfying records, if I might say.
You may, and and I appreciate it, and I'm very, very thankful and honored always to be on your show.
Oh, thanks.
And I appreciate you asking.
Well, yeah. I don't. We're getting into the territory as we talk about this record. We're getting into this territory that I'm sometimes reluctant to invoke, which is because some people bristle when I say it seems to me that you may have made a conceptual record, conceptual album, a concept album of some kind, but there does seem to be some sort of concept here on some level. Would you agree with that? Here we are. We're in the thick of it now.
Let the bristling begin. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's probably. I mean, that could be a somewhat of a self-serving. I think so, because I think to say that something is a concept album immediately gives it a certain kind of weight, and dresses it up in a way, and maybe suggests a certain, a certain perspective to take while listening to it, as opposed to, what would be called a regular album, I guess, or something that's non-concept driven. And I mean, ultimately, I think that if something's a concept album or not is sort of up to the listener.
That's true. Sure.
And it's great to hear that you pick up that vibe from it, or you get that sense. And I would probably agree. Yeah. So there's a long-winded way of saying I would agree.
Well, I think when people latch on to this notion that something might be a concept record, whether that's conveyed by the creator or whether that's just something that the listener picks up upon, I feel like they're just basically suggesting it feels like the separate pieces are connected or interconnected in some way.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from. For those who haven't checked it out yet, and please, I'm going to do... Well, why don't I ask you to actually describe it? Because all I was going to describe were the two sides of the record and sort of how they work. So I'd rather you do it rather than me perform some clumsy attempt at it. Could you mind talking about side A and side B of this album and sort of how they're connected?
Yeah, I'll try. Let me see what I can do. As you know, Vish, this is always very challenging for me to put what has been put forth in my attempts at making music, and then trying to translate that into language.
Sure.
Is always challenging for me, but I'll give it a shot.
You're not, by the way, I mean, I talk to people in your vocation all the time. You are not alone. I do. It is a struggle I have too when I ask someone about their work, because I have this nagging suspicion that their work is enough, and that anything beyond, elaborating beyond the song and what they've expressed is a selfish pursuit on my part and maybe other people's part. I feel almost, it's like nosiness, or maybe I'm being prurient or something. But my point, I guess, just so I have some questions about the songs specifically, but I just, if this helps you, I thought maybe just describing how the two sides are constructed. Just to follow our thread of whether or not it may or may not be a concept record or whatever. I don't know if that helps. Just basic, just like, here's what's on side A and here's how side B works. That's it. That's all I meant. Does that help? I don't want you to feel like you're mired in like, oh, now I got to explain everything that happens. But I mean, I have some questions about those things too. But I just thought an easy way of introducing people to this notion that we might be upon a concept of some kind. That's all. That's all I meant.
Yeah, no.
Trying to make it easy for you. I'm just trying to make.
Yeah.
I know you're self-conscious about your explanations of things, but I always
Yeah,
find
yeah.
them fascinating, and I learn things for sure. So that's the other side of this. Please don't feel self-conscious. I feel like your descriptions are appropriate and interesting in their own way, insightful in their own way.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Side A is one long song. It's called it's called "In Another Life." It's where the title of the album comes from, and it is okay. What's notable about this song for me is that I guess 95% or 90 to 95% was written in one sitting, which is for me very unusual. A lot of songwriters probably work that way, but for me, usually it can take days, weeks, months, years, sometimes to finish a song. And it's also unusual that a song of that length, would have been done in one sitting. And I hope that this doesn't come off as me boasting, because it was really more of just, this, you hear people talk about something kind of taking over and that they feel like they're just a conduit for something else,
Right,
like
sure.
I was doing it, but I really was kind of watching myself do it in a strange way, observing myself just, writing out, many verses, which like I said, which I never do. So that was unusual for me and exciting, and got me thinking about the possibility of an extended song form, like something that would go on possibly longer than what most people might think is sensible. And I want
infinite songwriting, I believe, is.
Well, yeah, so that's a thing that, after you finish something and then someone asks you, okay, what is this thing? What do you call it? Then the mind has to kind of find a way to justify what's been done. And that's what that term infinite songwriting is, not to belittle it, but it is an after the fact observation or justification. But the idea was to see what would happen in a piece of music like that just went on and on and on, and didn't necessarily have its goal to have a sense of forward motion. In this case, it was more of a sense of outwardly expanding motion, or sideways, what I think of as sideways motion. And it's just kind of a little waft of an idea, I would say, but it was enough to push me forward and to pursue this song,
Yeah.
And so that's side A. So that's the one long song. Side B.
But before we
yeah.
get to side B, can I just follow up on a couple of things you said there?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, I'm just curious about this notion of progress being only. I guess it's just the way we are built. We think that progress means forward motion, and I'm intrigued by this notion of yours that progress can be sideways, or move sideways, but not that doesn't necessarily mean it's moving forward. That distinction between forward and sideways and progress or movement, I just find it curious. Like, what to you is the distinction between sideways and forward exactly?
I think that one has to do forward. To me, conjures up this feeling of progress, improvement, strength, development,
resolution.
Possibly resolution, and then also accumulation. These kinds of things, which for me, they're fine ideas in themselves, but I think they tend to potentially put pressure on the mind to think of things as everything should always get bigger.
Like in terms of a dynamic structure, things go up and down, whatever, loud, quiet, these kinds of things are what we expect often. This is more of a constant sound. Like the song is long, the chord structure is repetitive, for lack of a better term. The lyrics are sort of meditative. They hint at upon some sense of escapism, I think, but at the same time, there's just this feeling of, I don't know, consistency, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, to touch on that, I think that maybe a really, really simple way, and this probably lacks a lot of nuance, but a simple way to explain how I think of the difference between forward and sideways would be work versus play. Work tends to be goal oriented, and play tends to be more about exploration. And that was really, while I was working on it, I think, consciously or subconsciously, I was trying to invoke more the sense of play as opposed to work, and less about reaching a goal and reaching a resolution, and more about exploring that sense of play and possibility, and what happens to the mind when it's in that state, which to me is possibly a more fruitful state of mind, strangely enough. I mean, it may not be about achieving things, but actually a lot is achieved in that state.
I see. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
No, that explains it. I mean, do you want to say anything about what's going on from your perspective anyway, in terms of the lyrical motifs, I suppose, and this notion of there's a daydreamy aspect to it, which is, I suppose, captured in this notion of in another life. I hinted at escapism as well, and it's a synthesized kind of song. I'm just curious. It does have an otherworldliness to it, and that's conveyed both in, like I say, the title, the music. I'm just curious if anything about the lyrics is something that you want to kind of talk about in terms of your headspace. I mean, you say you kind of wrote in a way that you've never written before. 95% of it came to you. Do you have a sense of where this stuff came from in terms of your mindset at the time?
Yeah, it was probably a way of building an alternate or a place to escape to, and building some sort of space to throw a bunch of ideas against the wall and see if they stick, or actually not even to see if they stick, like with no real, like there's no real, it's not a rigorous kind of critique of anything. It's not a way of offering, solutions or a place to escape that supposedly has figured everything out or has offered solutions. It is more a meditative lyric for me, and the form sort of dictated what the content was as well. Like there's, I'm not sure what the technical term for that is in poetry, but the 3 lines and then the 4th line being the same every time. And so it very neatly suggested what the content could be. There's here's a possibility, here's a possibility, here's a possibility, and this is where the possibility, can be found. That's the essence of the form of the song.
Right.
And, whether or not it's a critique, I mean, it could be read as a critique of whatever my current environment might have been at the time or how I perceived it. And that can extend to, what other people are experiencing. I think that for me, making music in general often acts as a counterbalance to other forces that I'm feeling, around me, or, and that is reflected in the lyric and also in the music. How I'm inclined to construct music is that I'm looking for a counterbalance to, to whether it's my own anxiety or what I'm perceiving to be happening in the world around me, and that's probably why I'm not somebody who meditates. I don't have a meditation practice. Yeah. But I certainly see the benefits and I appreciate it. And for me, music is basically the same thing. Making music is the same thing as that. So
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if that touches on what you're asking, but
no, it does, and I feel like you've I mean, the mood of the song, I feel like your response captures that mood, that tone, that kind of searching tone. It's a responsive tone to something in the world, and I think we might get into more of the universalism, I suppose, of the record as we begin to talk about the second side as well. And so I defer to you now. Do you want to similarly explain the structure of the second side of this record in Another Life?
Yeah, okay. So the second side is called Everybody's Paris. So it started out as a song that the structure of the whole second side is that it's one song, but it's kind of got three separate movements. And essentially the three movements are the exact same structure, but with completely different instrumentation, different singers, and different lyrics.
Yeah.
Even though the lyrics they follow a pretty strict form. Mm-hmm. And so the first section I sing. I wrote the lyrics and I sing. The second section, Andre Ethier wrote the lyrics and he sings. Mm-hmm. And the third is Dan Behar. He wrote the lyrics and he sings.
Right.
And so several years ago, I wrote the first section, and it was kind of just almost a bit of a throwaway song. Like, it was something that also came very, very quickly and had a bit of almost a nursery rhyme kind of feeling to it. Mm-hmm. And that was novel for me because that sort of thing hasn't typically come very easily to me. And I just sort of let it sit for a while, but it was always kind of ringing in the back of my head. I would sort of play with the lyrics quite a bit, and even it was a bit of a running joke, maybe in my own head, or sometimes I think I told Andre about it many years ago, and we would even, there was even a bit of a gag, occasionally we would kind of make up, lyrics for the song and just for a chuckle.
Yeah.
And then one day it dawned on me that, there is a reason that this thing keeps popping up in my head, even though I wasn't taking it seriously. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, I should listen to this voice that, like, this is, this keeps popping up. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice because it's the kind of song that you could just plug anything in, really. It's, the structure is very simple. Everybody's blank, everybody's blank, everybody's blank, everybody's blank, da 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 da. And then there's a refrain where, could be seen as a counterbalance to the verse, or it could be seen as a way of explaining what just happened in the verse, or it could be a tangential thing, So it's a very simple concept, but very almost infinite as well. And it that's how it plugs into this record, is that it's a potentially infinite concept, because I could ask really any songwriter or any lyric writer to take a stab at it. And so that was, for me, very exciting, because it was, first of all, it was something that I hadn't really heard before, or I hadn't really experienced that kind of concept in songwriting before, other than in rap music, actually, in hip hop. Like, that's what happens when there's 3 or 4 MCs on a song, and they each take a verse, and each verse is kind of related to the theme, but they're completely giving their own perspective.
Right. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And I mean, I couldn't really think of any scenarios in song, quote unquote songwriting, where that happens. Usually it's just the only thing I could think of was the duet, the kind of the romantic duet where it's, 2 partners, singing back and forth to one another. And this was not that. This was more like an endless expansion on this theme. And the theme was vague enough that I thought, it would give lots of room for Dan and Andre to just kind of go with it and interpret what the line, "Everybody's Paris," what that actually means to them.
Yeah.
and use that as a jumping off point. And they did so. It's marvelous. I mean, for me, they're both amazing. They're both incredible songwriters, and I was just thrilled that they both agreed to do it and that they delivered the way that they did.
Yeah, no, they're all remarkable in their own way, and I feel like for those two songwriters, in terms of my familiarity with their work, it feels like it captures their particular approach and tone to their own work. And I can get into that in a moment, but I feel like we should. I mean, we've talked about infinite songwriting. We've talked about infinity, I suppose. I mean, this notion that, you know, we're all kind of tied to the same timeline, whatever that might be. Wherever we are, we're connected by this timeline that we're all together on. Whatever's happening in the world, we're experiencing it all together. But there's a couple of things I want to ask about. First of all, this notion of everybody. Everybody, everywhere. These things come up, and it's a pretty humorous generalization to say that everybody's doing anything.
Absolutely.
And the way these songs unfold, the way each of the writers on these three songs have tried to capture that notion that everybody is experiencing something is humorous to me and clever to me. But I actually want to begin with this, with Paris. This notion that Paris is this city that has been romanticized and is, you know, around the world. I think everyone has the kind of, whether they've been there or not, they just have kind of a perspective on Paris, what they think it is, what it might be, what it stands for. And that can be a myriad of things. I want to begin with that, since I believe this everybody's Paris concept is your own. What does that mean to you? What does the city mean to you? What does it stand for to you? And how does it work in terms of this notion that everybody's Paris?
Yeah, I mean, Vish, you're nailing it. You know.
I didn't realize. Is this a test? Am I doing well?
You're doing well. It's incredible. I mean, I feel like you could explain the record probably better than I could. You know.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I appreciate that. No, I think there's something to this that it must speak to you as a place, as an idea. It must, and this notion that we're all connected to this place, an idea, whatever our concept of it might be. I don't know. There's something going on there. I'm just firing stuff out here. You tell me. I don't know. I just am curious why it stood out for you. That's all.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, like I said, you're nailing it. And Paris, you know, Paris is in a way the ultimate fantasy city. You know, it at least in my experience growing up, you know, in this time period, and you know, the 20th and 21st century, growing up in North America, Paris represents a kind of fantasy city in a lot of ways. I mean, you could say that, you know, other cities do as well, but Paris has a specific kind of flavor to it, or it gives off a certain scent.
Yeah,
just the word, and that alone was enough richness for me to feel like that's an idea to pursue, you know, because it was open enough, but was emitting a very strong, again, a scent, you know. And that was the first line that came when I wrote the song. And, you know, I had no idea, again, where it came from. It was just, it sounded good. It felt good. And, you know, it was only later that I started to see that there was a lot of potential in that line. As for my personal feelings about Paris, I mean, I don't actually have any particularly noteworthy insights into the city. I was very lucky in that I got to spend about 3 weeks there, I think in 2013, working on a record, producing a Parisian band.
Oh.
And I mean, it was a beautiful experience for me. They were absolute sweethearts, and I got to live in Paris for 3 weeks, you know, and get to feel, you know, like it was like a fantasy, like getting to feel like a Parisian or something, even though obviously I was the furthest thing from a Parisian. But I would go and I would, you know, have my little pain au chocolat every morning, and walk the streets and think that I looked better than I probably did, or whatever. Like all of these things, they're all connected to fantasy, and a lot of what people consume is connected to fantasy, to chasing some sort of fantasy, chasing some sort of ideal, and then connected to that, the idea of saying everybody's this or everybody's something, that as well is a kind of a fantasy that a lot of people can be tempted to pursue, to try to nail down a perspective and to say that, this is the truth about this thing.
Yeah.
It's similar to saying everybody's this, everybody's doing this. And it is a seductive fantasy that I think is worth kind of prying open and having some fun with, and maybe even poking some fun at. Like I'm really glad that you said that you picked up the humor in the song, because for me it is a funny song, and it's kind of absurd, kind of ridiculous. And even though I could never even hope to approach the kind of writing that someone like Randy Newman does.
Yeah.
The whole concept of the untrustworthy narrator. To me, that's a fascinating way of writing. And this was maybe just, an attempt at scratching the surface of that sort of approach.
Right. Right.
And again, it fits with the concept of potentially having anybody write their version of this song. And it's interesting to see what comes out, for each individual, what kind of perspective comes out. And I think it was almost a therapeutic process to go through that and to see what, I came up with when given the task of trying to generalize about life experience.
Yeah, I mean, we are living in a time where such generalization has sort of been weaponized. That everybody is one way, or everybody from a certain group might be one way. So I viewed it as as some kind of humorous or almost borderline sarcastic sentiment. Although I do feel like, from what I'm gathering, this notion that everybody's Paris has an aspirational quality in terms of in terms of how you view the city, in terms of how we tend to romanticize the city. If you're feeling down and low, just remember we're all Paris in our own way. We all look better than we probably think we do, or actually do. We all, there's this kind of ego within it as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I just find that fascinating myself. And then as we break down the different iterations of it, I feel like you are, as I say, I feel like the three songwriters' voices, in terms of their writing voices, really comes through. And I feel like there's a sardonic quality to you. Like there's a line in yours, everybody's nightmares are getting in the way. That's funny. That's inherently funny, but it's also a little dark. It's also a little disturbing. What was going on? And then I might as well do this. Like Andre, I feel like he hits upon, like when I think of words and images that he conjures, it's like gardens and gates and dishes and drug pushers and chairs and lovers and dreams and sunlight, sort of elemental things that we encounter every day. Whereas Dan Behar, typical Dan, there's a little bit of contrariness there. One of his first lines is "Not everybody's Paris," actually. So I found that funny. They're all kind of humorous in their own way. So I guess this is my own long-winded way of asking if you have a sense or an assessment of where yourself and these two guys were coming from, and what's your view on what's your perspective on what they're saying and doing with this concept of everybody's Paris?
I mean, again, you're just nailing it, Vish.
Yeah,
I think
I'm the best. I think everybody's Paris.
You
How about
are.
Vish?
Yeah.
Vish is Paris. Everybody's, whatever. No,
I hope. I hope you'll write your own version of the song.
I should. Maybe I should. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, as far as positioning, I'd be hesitant to, as seductive as it is, I'd be hesitant to say that well, Dan's the jester, or Andre's the
Yeah.
as
Andre's the romantic, maybe?
Andre's the romantic,
Yeah.
and it's not for me to say what I am in that triage. Is that a triage? No.
Well, that sounds
What it
more like
was-
there's a
Yeah.
problem that needs
Yeah,
to,
no,
people
it's
are in danger
yeah.
or something, and they need
Yeah.
help, medical help.
Sorry, yeah. Sorry, it's trifecta.
Yes, that's
the word
that's
I was
right. I
thinking
believe
of.
that's what you were looking for. Yes. Yeah, no, I there's something going on. I feel like Dan is, Dan's invoking people being torn to pieces and cut to shreds and haunted houses and things like that. Whereas Andre's is, lovers walking down the street, not fulfilling expectations. And I feel like Andre takes me to Paris. I feel like I'm walking down. I've never been, actually, to be honest. I've never been to Paris. I somehow have never been. We need to go at some point. But
you should.
Yeah, but that's all. I feel like they're characters, but at the same time, it's not schmaltzy. I feel like Andre has his own sort of undercurrent of darkness, even when he's seemingly talking about something sunny and light.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, no, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I guess
Oh, no.
if anything, I thought maybe it would be an opportunity for you to be a bit effusive about what these people have done with the initial concept, the initial idea, and taken it in their own direction. That's all.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that they really, each of their individual characteristics really get a chance to come out and shine. As cheesy as that sounds, they both have such strong characters as people, for sure, but and as writers, as an extension, and as singers too. They both have really unique voices. And, the way they approached it was really just, I asked the two of them because they have such distinct styles, and because they're so different from each other and from myself as well.
Yeah.
I did feel like there would be a lot of contrast, and that was really what I was looking for, what I was hoping for. And, like you said, there's sweetness, there's darkness, there's humor running throughout, I think, all three versions. And the challenge for me was really just to provide each of them with a room that they would feel comfortable in, a musical room, so to speak, and that would kind of help to keep them buoyant, help to keep them afloat, and to give them something to just be themselves in, to hang their lyrics off of. And they both expressed to me that they were, felt really comfortable with the music, and that it felt good to sing over it. And, that was really my only goal. Everything else, I just sort of knew that they would do well with it. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I couldn't be happier. Like I admire them both so much as musicians and writers, and I look up to both of them. They're both influences on me as a writer. So I mean there are lines in both of their versions which make me laugh. I'm kind of blanking now, actually.
No, that's fine. I recited a few fragments myself. I think, to be fair, the best thing for anyone to do is to listen to this record and listen to these songs and pick these sort of gems out for themselves. I didn't. Yeah. That's why I kind of thought maybe just fragments of lyrics and ideas might be worth mentioning. You mentioned putting that they were comfortable in the sort of musical rooms that you put them in. And earlier you invoked hip hop in terms of this second side of this record, in terms of the fact that, I mean, I was going to say, and I don't want to get into any kind of argumentative state here, but I do think that in the history of music, all genres, there is obviously a legacy of adaptation, of reinterpretation, of adding things. That has occurred before, but this is unusual. I will also say, for someone maybe in your realm to take. So it's an innovative idea, and it's a cool idea. But you did invoke hip hop and this notion that they're each sort of doing it's almost like they're each doing a verse on the same song. And I know I believe you're a fan of hip hop. In fact, when I first heard Everybody's Paris, I couldn't help but think of Watch the Throne.
Whoa!
And
Oh my God, that's I can go to sleep now for the rest of the day. That's just
Kanye West and Jay-Z have this song called N-Words in Paris, and I believe you and I were both at. I went to 2 Watch the Throne shows in Toronto.
Yeah.
Did you go to one? Did you go to both? Did you go to any? I can't remember. I know you've seen Kanye. You've seen Kanye West, right?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Did you go to any of the Watch the Throne shows?
I was at one of them. How many were there? Were there like 7 or 8? Or
no, there were. Well, in Toronto there were 2.
Okay,
and
2,
like
okay,
they would do these sort of residencies in every city, and one of the hallmarks of those concerts were they would do the song N-Words in Paris, and then Jay-Z would yell again, and they would do it. I think the first night they did it 9 times in a row, back to back, and then the second time was like 12 times. I can't remember exactly.
Right.
Probably made note of it somewhere. So anyway, I feel like that when I talk about Paris as this aspirational place, I have this association with that city because of that song now, and now you've got a thing. All this to say, all I was trying to get at here is the production, the musical production, and whether you thought hip-hop has influenced you in your own minimal music. Hip-hop has evolved to the point where it's not even, sometimes there's barely beats on a hip-hop song these days. It's very much a pulsing, moodier music than I think it's ever been. And on some level, there are a few, did you employ auto-tune on this record? I can't remember. I hear little synthesized flourishes that remind me of things from some of my favorite contemporary hip-hop records. And I know he's a pariah now, but when I think of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy by Kanye West, which I still, despite everything he's said and done, I still have there's something in my heart where that record, the record kind of lives in my heart as one of the finest hip-hop masterpiece types of records I've ever encountered. And I hear, and obviously there's even credibility issues now about what he did and didn't do himself. That's all the rage, discounting whether or not he is even responsible for some of his finest work. All this to say, though, I hear hip-hop's influence on this side of the record per se, and perhaps even the first side. Is it something that you can see in your work? Like, do you see its influence as a fan?
I think so. Yeah, without trying to piggyback myself onto hip hop, in a way to legitimize
I understand
what I'm doing. But
yeah,
absolutely. I'm definitely influenced by hip hop, musically. And I mean, Mr. West, I mean, he's a phenomenal producer in my opinion, and an alchemist. I mean, it just has a very special talent for synthesizing different ideas. And I mean, I really loved that record. I Watch the Throne. I loved even more, I think, because of the contrast between the two of them, and the way that they sort of, I found that they sort of each brought out a more tender side of each other than I'd ever heard in either of them, in either of their solo works. Like with a solo work, you can tend to, unfortunately, devolve too deep down the narcissistic well, And the nice thing about Watch the Throne is that there is that, but they also bring out really, really quite nice qualities in each other's personalities, even if it's very, very subtle, or you have to really dig to find it. I do hear it and I feel it there. And I mean, for me, the most remarkable part of that record, and also of that concert, was when they sang that song. They did that song about their future children. I mean, it was just so beautiful and kind of hilarious, because there's so much hypocrisy in a way in
absolutely.
But there was a real attempt at tenderness there.
Emotion, actual emotion, not just aggression.
I mean, aggression is an emotion as well.
Yes.
And right. It's 100% valid, and in hip hop it's appropriate and understandable, and but you just don't see that attempt at again, to use a word that's being thrown around so much and almost losing its meaning, vulnerability. You just don't really see that level of attempt in hip hop, or at least I hadn't seen it before. And anyways, it's kind of going too far off the mark. But yeah, the production, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm influenced and inspired by people doing remarkable things with very few elements.
Yeah, that seems to be a greater trend now. There's a more of a. We seem to have gone past an orchestral, multi-layered soundscape sort of thing that we were inundated with for a while. Just the idea of maximizing sound, and it seems to be coming back down to earth a little bit in terms of more minimal sounds. And I would say your record is a nice exemplification of that as well. That's great. I mean, I think that it's a response to overload, right? Information overload. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Are you? Some of us remain somewhat artistically intrigued by Mr. West. Some of us are very heartbroken by his celebrity. Since he's become more of a celebrity than an artist, so to speak. I mean, do you have thoughts on that? Has this been difficult for you to see him change, so to speak, or has he always been this way? Like maybe we were just. I came to the conclusion that perhaps I had just been blinded by the art and didn't see the misogyny, didn't see the narcissism as. I mean, I saw the misogyny as problematic, but it didn't dissuade me the way it should have, and I sort of am regretful of it now. But anyway, that's just me. What do you think?
My first instinct is really to say no comment.
Okay, that's fair.
I think because it's a can of worms. But I mean, absolutely, the misogyny and the narcissism has always been there. I think from the very beginning, and as it is with a lot of people, and I mean, it's always a conflicted sort of feeling listening to his music,
Yeah, that's where I'm at too.
Yeah, and it always has been, and I mean that tension is part of what makes it kind of fascinating as well, because it's not just one thing. Actually, it's several things, and he really lays out his inner conflict. It's really laid out. It's really on the table.
Yeah, it's true.
In his writing and in the music itself as well. There's a lot of tension in the music, and that's kind of, I think, what people are drawn to music in the same way that they're drawn to storytelling. When a story has a lot of conflict in it and tension, we tend to get hooked, right? And I mean, that's to expect that a musician is, somebody who you can model your behavior after, is, I think it's unreasonable.
Yeah,
and
that's fair.
But I mean, it's disappointing to see all of this stuff, but at the same time, it's not surprising.
Yeah, that's fair.
And
Okay, well, that was a good no comment, by the way. No, it's a reasoned no comment. I do appreciate that. I didn't mean to go on too far a tangent, but I heard things on the record that made me think of these things, I suppose. So I felt like it was worth mentioning. So what is sort of next for you? I know you're a busy person in your studio space there. Is this a record you'll take on the road? Is this are there plans for other? Are there things that didn't make it onto this release that you recorded and are trying to figure out what to do with? Anything like that?
Yeah, these two songs were actually recorded in. I had a full month of recording that I did last year, and I recorded a batch of music that I'd been writing for the last 6 or 7 years, and these two songs were just a portion of that batch of stuff that got recorded. So there's another 2 records actually that I'm trying to finish.
Oh wow!
With material that was recorded then, and then there's a third one that's kind of like just started. But it's all stuff that has been written kind of, in a continuous stream over the last 6 or 7 years. So I'm just kind of working on that, trying to get that done. As you know, I'm not much of a road dog, really.
No.
But I'm gonna do some shows. Yeah, the band and we're gonna sort of do the local spots.
Okay.
The 401 tour.
Okay, great. That's awesome.
And then, that's probably it. There was going to be a tour overseas in September, but I canceled it back in the spring because I had a feeling that I wasn't going to be able to make it happen. And it turned out to be true because this summer was really, really a lot of upheaval and a lot of difficult stuff happened this summer.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
So yeah, it wouldn't have been able to happen anyways. So.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Where should we send people to go on the computers to learn more about you and your record? I presume cstrecords.com Constellation site is one place. Is there anywhere else you'd like to send people?
That's probably the best place because there is the write up about the record. On my my website is there's general information there. There's a lot of historical information, but there's actually not much about this record at all.
Okay.
There's really no information. So if someone wants to read about the record, before they listen to it, the Constellation site is really the only place. But I encourage anybody who's interested to just check it out. It's coming out September 14th.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I would be ecstatic if people listen to it.
All right. Well, I hope this compels them to do that as well. And speaking of which, is there a song, a piece from this record that we can play for people right now so that they can get a sense of what we've been speaking about?
Yeah. I mean, it's a slow moving record. So maybe if you're just to choose one thing, you could play Andre's version of Everybody's Paris because it's kind of the one that's the most upbeat, right?
Okay, this is part 2, right?
Part 2, yeah, part 2.
Okay, well, yeah, that I feel like we've talked about it and you've explained it. I feel like that's a good way to go. This is Everybody's Paris Part 2. Featuring Andre Ethier from the new Sandro Perri record, In Another Life. Sandro, this was another fun conversation for me. I hope it was fulfilling for you. Thank you so much for your time, and best of luck with everything going forward.
Absolutely. Really fun for me. Thanks, Vish. Thanks so much.
Everybody's gardens, everybody's gates, everybody's pushers pushing everybody's weight. Everybody's Paris, everybody's spring. Everybody feels the same way about a lot of things. Everybody's putting away the plates, washing the glasses, seeing their face, looking over my shoulder. Everybody's there. I step into a doorway, I slip into a chair. I thought as we were walking you would offer me a line, the way a lover somehow does from time to time. But no. Everybody's flowers love to be received, held up to our noses. Everybody's pleased, everybody sees you, everybody smiles, everybody's nails come out, everybody files, everybody circles, everybody bows. Everybody's hands are held as long as it's allowed. Above the chimney, up above the clouds, Everybody's airplane is looking for the ground. Everybody's in Paris. Everybody's been seen. Everybody's been recognized when they're waking from a dream. I like the sunlight in the morning, the stars at night. Everybody feels just like me, and everybody's right. I thought as we were walking, you would offer me a line, the way a lover somehow does from time to time, but no one takes comfort in lovers holding hands anymore. Everybody's garden, everybody's gates, everybody's pushers pushing someone else's weight. Everybody's Paris, everybody's spring. Everybody feels the same way about a lot of things. Everybody's putting away the plates, washing the glasses, seeing their face, looking over my shoulder. Everybody's there. I step into a doorway, I slip into a chair. Everybody's flowers love to be received, held up to our noses. Everybody sneeze.
Special thanks to my old friend, someone I admire very, very much. I've long followed his music, Sandro Perri. That was Sandro Perri on the 426th episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Entertainment One podcast network and available on all iOS and Android platforms, and also on things like Spotify, YouTube, and Audio Boom as well. If you can't find an episode that you're looking for, or if you wish to learn more about me and sign up for my regularly scheduled newsletter, please visit my website, vishkhanna.com. You can like Creative Control on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at VishCreative, or follow me at Vishkhanna. Also, you can listen to a radio show version of Creative Control on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Standard Time, around the world at cfu.ca, or on an actual radio at 93.3 FM if you're in or near Guelph. Also, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control to make a flexible monthly donation to keep this podcast going. Thank you to everyone who does that. If you are on the fence about it, please consider making a flexible monthly donation to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Creative Control. Thanks again for the in-kind support I received from Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf, Planet Bean Coffee, Grandad's Donuts, and Planet of Sound, locations in Toronto and Ottawa. Also, thanks to my pal Jim Guthrie for letting me use the instrumental version of his song, The Rest Is Yet to Come. Here to end the show each week. You're hearing it now. You're hearing that song now. JimGuthrie.org for more info about him. And finally, thanks to you for listening to this show and downloading episodes and subscribing to this podcast on whatever your podcast platform of choice happens to be. That's all I have to say for now. I will talk to you very soon. Bye for now.